بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ثم أما بعد. So while we said and emphasized that the deed that is best is the deed that is most desirable by Allah at the particular time and situation, there are certain deeds that are inherently virtuous over other deeds. Certain deeds that are inherently virtuous. And the companions would not make this question unless they have known that there are deeds that are better than others. And the companions often asked the Prophet ﷺ about the best of deeds. Because they were keen to draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here are some of the Prophet's answers. Mu'adh ibn Jabal asked the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, أَيُّ الْأَعْمَالِ يَحَبُّ إِلَى اللَّهِ قَالَ أَن تَمُوتَ وَلِسَانُكَ رَطْبٌ مِنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. So Tabarani and Ibn Hibban reported from Mu'adh ibn Jabal, he said, I asked the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, which of the deeds is more beloved to Allah? He said, to die while your tongue is wet with the remembrance of Allah, or moist from the remembrance of Allah. So can you imagine this? Like you are in this, what does this mean? It means that you are in constant remembrance. Because when does death come? Immediately, suddenly. You don't know when death comes. So this means that you are in constant remembrance of Allah, that when death comes, your tongue will be moist with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the remembrance of Allah is not only a verbal phenomenon. The remembrance of Allah is a heart reaction, firstly and foremostly, and then it is accompanied by the remembrance of the tongue. But the tongue is reminding the heart to stay in remembrance. The tongue basically is reminding the heart to stay in remembrance and manifesting this remembrance. It's a mutual feedback between the tongue and the heart, mutual relationship between the tongue and the heart. And if the heart is in remembrance, the tongue will manifest it. It will come on the tongue without effort. And if the tongue is in remembrance, the heart gets reminded of whatever the tongue says if one is paying attention and is contemplative. But certainly, the shaitan can make this very habit of remembrance also void of its meaning, function, benefit by becoming a second habit without contemplation. So tark al-tafakkur, abandonment of tafakkur, contemplation, is the killer of any action. When you're praying without contemplation of the benefits of the prayer, what you're about when you start the prayer, that the prayer is a conversation with Allah, it's supplication, it's munajah, which is soft conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when you forget all of this, then the prayer will be void of the best of what it is about, and will not produce the benefit that is expected. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, whenever Abdullah is mentioned without mentioning which Abdullah, then they're talking about Ibn Mas'ud. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud said, I asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, أَيُّ الْأَعْمَالِ يَحَبُّ إِلَى اللَّهِ قَالَ الصَّلَاةُ عَلَى وَقْتِهَا. By the way, why is this? Why is Abdullah means Abdullah ibn Mas'ud? Because in our culture, whenever there is like a lot of people competing, then you give precedence to the oldest. And Abdullah ibn Abbas and Abdullah ibn Umar and Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As and Abdullah ibn Zubayr are all juniors to Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. And those would be the ones that would come to mind when you talk about Abdullah. The Abadila are four. The ones that are called Abdullah are four. These are Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, and Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As. Amr ibn al-As. Okay, so Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is not considered one of them because he was not as young as they are. So he takes a special status. He was certainly older than all of the four. And whenever Abdullah is mentioned, then it is without mentioning son of whom, then it is Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, radiallahu anhu. And the two that are most junior out of them are who? Ibn Umar and Ibn Umar, Ibn Abbas and Ibn Zubayr. And the most junior of all of them is Ibn Zubayr. So Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu said, I asked the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, أي الأعمال يحب إلى الله؟ قال الصلاة على وقتها. قلت ثم أي؟ قال ثم بر الوالدين. قلت ثم أي؟ قال ثم الجهاد في سبيل الله. قال حدثني بهن ولو استزدته لزادني. I asked the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, which of the deeds are more beloved to Allah? He said, praying on time. Then I asked him, and then which is next? He said, kindness to the parents. And then I asked him, and which is next? And then he said, al-jihad fi sabilillah, or in the cause of Allah. And if I asked him for more, he would have given me more. So, do you notice that this is different from the answer that he gave to Mu'adh ibn Jabal? And this is another different answer. This is about a man from Khathan. So this man from the tribe of Khathan came and asked the Prophet ﷺ while he was in the midst of his ashab companions. He said, فَقُلْتُ أَنْتَ الَّذِي تَزْعُمُ أَنَّكَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. You are the one. I came to the Prophet ﷺ and he was amongst his companions, and I said to him, you are the one who claims to be the messenger of God. قال نعم. He said yes, simply yes. قال قلت يا رسول الله أي الأعمال أحب إلى الله؟ قال الإيمان بالله. He said, O Messenger of Allah, which of the deeds is most beloved to Allah? And the Messenger ﷺ said, Al-Imanu billah, belief in Allah or faith in Allah. Then he asked him, ثم ما? قال ثم صلة الرحم. And then which one is next? And then he said, kindness to the king. And then he asked him, which one is next? And then he said, to ordain good and forbid bad. And then he said, which of the deeds are most to be hated to Allah? He said, Ishraku billah, ascribe partners to Allah. And then he said, which is next? And then he said, to shun your king. And then he said, which is next? He said, to ordain bad and forbid good. So basically the opposites of what he said first about the deeds most beloved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you'll find that the answers are different from the previous ones. But if someone comes to the Prophet ﷺ and asks him and says to him, you're the one who claims to be the messenger of God, should you jump over faith and go right into prayer here? Because this is a man who is shaking faith. This is a man who is saying to the messenger of Allah, you're the one who claims to be the messenger of God. So certainly what this man needs the most is faith. Because that's the priority for this particular man. So it would have been inappropriate for this man to tell him prayer. Or to tell him to die while your tongue is moist with the remembrance of Allah. And then because this man was rough, the Prophet ﷺ made sure to tell him that the second best is kindness to the king. Because he felt that he was rough. He's coming to the Messenger of Allah in the midst of his companions, and he has this rough attitude, and he says to him, you are the one who claims to be the Messenger of God. So for this man, he needs to, soften his heart before, anything else. And then the Prophet ﷺ felt that this man, because usually bad and good qualities are mixed in a certain way, that there is usually a good balance. So roughness and bravery can sometimes be mixed. So people who are rough, they could be more, they could be braver, they could be more capable of ordaining good and forbidding bad, because this is just their nature. So the Prophet ﷺ told them first that you need to soften a little bit, but use that quality in you, because it's brave also to come while the Prophet ﷺ is sitting in the midst of his companions and to tell him, you are the one who claims to be the messenger of God. It indicates, certainly in that particular context, it's audacity. It is not praiseworthy bravery, but it indicates that he does have this in him, that he has this sort of quality in him. So the Prophet pointed out to him how to use it right. After you soften your heart and you become more moderate and softer and know how to join the kin, then you can ordain good and forbid bad. Use that quality in you, and go and ordain good and forbid bad. So this was the right prescription for this one. And then, this is the hadith that I mentioned earlier from Tabarani, reported from Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, about the أحب الناس إلى الله وأحب الأعمال إلى الله, where the Prophet ﷺ said the most beloved of people to Allah is the one who brings the most benefit to people, and the most beloved of deeds to Allah is making a Muslim happy, relieving him of hardship, paying off his debt, or warding off hunger from him, going with my Muslim brother and then the Prophet ﷺ said, and going with my Muslim brother to meet his need is dearer to me than observing i'tikaf in this mosque for a month. And he who suppresses his aggravation while being capable of retaliation, Allah will fill his heart with pleasure or with hope. Or in some other reports, it's raja, not rida. So pleasure or hope. On the day of resurrection, and whoever goes with his Muslim brother to meet his need, Allah will make him stand firm on the day when all feet will slip. When feet will slip or be shaky. In other words, this is the hadith that is used by the people who say that the deeds that are of benefit, that goes beyond the doer, are the most beloved of deeds. But this is not the single answer the Prophet ﷺ gave to this question, recurrent, repeated question by the companions, which tells you what? Tells you that even though some deeds are more virtuous than others, and the Prophet ﷺ mentioned some of them, yet the Prophet ﷺ was not given like one prescription for all. Everybody has their own prescription, depending on their qualities, their characteristics, the needs of the time as well. So it's about the person and about the time and the circumstance. I will take your questions now about the previous segment, and inshallah we'll start when we come back with the types of the hearts.
We know about Allah كتب الإحسان على كل شيء راعٍ وفي مسلم رعيته. So taking that aside versus zuhud, there seems to be a conflict in terms of like which route do we take. One is saying, be the best you can do, as a student in your job, whatever you do. Other one is saying, just somehow okay. I understand one level of excellence, but how do you understand this in terms of zuhud? You say that's a praiseworthy quality. Also, being excellent in all these things also praiseworthy quality. How would someone balance that?
Because zuhd is not to disown the dunya. Zuhd is to have this interest in the dunya. It is not necessarily to disown it. It is not necessarily to not possess it. It is to not let it possess you. So that's why the scholars used to say, keep it in your hand away from your heart. As long as you keep the dunya in your hand away from your heart, you're fine. But then, that is also not very easy. Keep in mind that there is nothing that is easy. It all goes back to your dedication, to the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And once you have been given the guidance, you will get the right answer. Your heart will get the right answer concerning every question. The end of Surah Al-Ankabut, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. And those who strive in our cause, we shall guide them to our paths, in plural. And I always, for some long time I wondered, why did Allah say subulana and not sabilana? Because the path of Allah is one, and there are other paths that are all paths to deviation. But why did Allah say in this ayah, subulana and not sabilana? Our paths versus our path in singular form. Do you know why? Because from your perspective, from Allah's perspective, there is one path to Allah. But given the variability of the questions and circumstances that you come across, that you encounter, many things that you encounter, many questions that come up, many situations where you need an answer. So from your end, from your perspective, there are multitudes of paths, because there are multitudes of situations, circumstances, questions that need answer, and so on. So regarding everything, you need guidance regarding your relationship with your wife, your relationship with your husband, or your career, moving or immigrating here, immigrating there, regarding the balance between the dunya and the akhirah, and how much you go about owning the dunya for the benefit of the Muslimin, for the benefit of yourself and your family, and when is that crossing the threshold, and when have you crossed into greed? Because there is a very fine line between owning the dunya to support yourself, support your family, sa'i al-armala wal-miskin, and to excel and to show people that Muslims do best at their jobs, and to even own it for the best interest of the Muslims, and give money like Abdurrahman ibn Auf and Uthman ibn Affan, who used to be very rich and used to support the cause of Islam in multitudes of ways, to the point where Abdurrahman ibn Auf, Uthman ibn Affan, the Prophet ﷺ said about him when he supported the mission of Jaysh al-Usra, or the battle of hardship, ما ضر عثمان بن عفان ما صنع بعد اليوم. Nothing would hurt Uthman ibn Affan after what he had done today. So you say to yourself, I want to be like Uthman ibn Affan. I want to be like Uthman ibn Affan and be able to do this for the Muslims. Is that a bad intention? No, it's not a bad intention. But then that requires a lot of work also. It requires, you to be like a Bill Gates or something close to that, to be able to support like an army, the mission of an army. So where do you draw the line? You would never get an answer from a sheikh about where to draw the line. That is truly when you need the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide your heart, so that all of your work and all of your excellence and work is for Him, not for anyone else. So basically, be concerned with one thing, which is the pleasure of Allah, and then you will get guidance concerning all things, all matters, all questions, all pursuits. But that is that is the ongoing struggle. That's why Allah called it الَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا. It's jihad. It is hard. It's a striving, struggle throughout your life. So that your main concern is the pleasure of Allah. And then you will not need to worry about so many things, because your heart will become guided. Your heart will get guidance concerning all of those difficult questions to answer. And they are certainly difficult questions to answer. And there is no one that can draw the line for you. There is no one that can draw the line for you where you should stop. So that's the answer to that. Could you explain the verse in a paradise as wide as the heavens and the earth? What does it mean by as wide as the heavens and the earth? It means as wide as the heavens and the earth. But keep in mind, like, one thing, that there are, you know, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes paradise, you have to always remember that لَيْسَ فِي الْجَنَّةِ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا الْأَسْمَاءِ. That there is nothing, there is no similarity between Jannah, that which is in Jannah, and that which is in dunya, except the names. Meaning that those names make things perceivable by you as a human being. But it is a completely different world, completely different existence. So don't think that whatever is in the Jannah is like whatever is in the dunya. Those descriptions are for you as a human being. There is some degree of overlap. Otherwise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not give us those things. So there is grapes and dates in Jannah. There is some degree of overlap between the grapes and dates of Jannah and the grapes and dates in dunya. Otherwise, the mention of grapes and dates in Jannah would be of no truth. But there is. However, they are completely unlike the grapes and dates in dunya. And this description is basically to give you an idea. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot, you know, because the grapes and dates in Jannah are completely different from the grapes and dates of dunya. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called them something else other than the grapes and dates, how would you relate to that? You cannot relate to that. So Allah gives you those as examples of what you may experience in Jannah, not that there is anything in Jannah that is like anything in the dunya. Or not that there is anything in this dunya like whatever will be there in Jannah. مَا لَا عَيْنٌ رَأَتْ وَلَا أُذُنٌ سَمِعَتْ وَلَا خَطَرَ عَلَى قَلْبِ بَشَرٍ. What Allah prepared for us in Jannah is unlike anything the eyes had seen, or anything the ears had heard, or anything that have come across the hearts of people, or the minds of people. Unlike anything. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to tell you of the vastness of this Jannah. So Allah tells you that the width of the Jannah is like the heavens and the earth. As much as you could comprehend as a human being, as much as you could encompass as a human being. Because there is nothing beyond the heavens and the earth for you as a human being. He stated that in the section, praising to Allah, to take advantage of your ability and to excel in worship while healthy, and that you will indefinitely be rewarded when you no longer have this ability, as indicated by the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. If the slave of Allah becomes ill or travels, Is it required if one prefers an act or performs an act or acts of worship, he or she must continue to perform them and maintain them? Why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why is it that Abdullah ibn Amr wished that he had taken the permit from the Prophet ﷺ about his fasting, praying, qiyam, when he grew older? That is actually consistent with what we said. The Prophet ﷺ told them to do what you can manage with consistency throughout your life. So cut down on your salah and siyam and qiyam so that you could be consistent in this throughout your life. And then when Abdullah ibn Umar grew older and these became harder on him, he wished that he accepted the advice of the Prophet ﷺ when he was older. But then, the idea here is, why did he wish to do that? He could have done this when he was older. He could have quit when he was older. Because that would be like a setback. You know, you do things that you can do consistently so that you do not go through such setbacks. You have a certain routine with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have a certain word, awrad, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Word is your routine function. Word is your routine wazifa or your routine function with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have a certain word of dhikr, certain word of salah, certain word of siyam, certain routine functions that you consistently do, and then you cut back on them. That's a setback. That is basically walking away, or partially walking away, or turning your back to Allah, or partially turning your back to Allah. So you should not do the things that you cannot consistently do. But sometimes, if you do the things that you could consistently do, and then you encounter an extraordinary circumstance such as travel or sickness, and you couldn't do them, then your reward will continue for those acts that you have been doing in your at home in the state of health. So basically, do the things that you could do in your ordinary conditions, that you could do consistently. And if you come across extraordinary conditions, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be most generous and He will continue the reward for you. Can you please give the reference/source of the parable of the king's ship again? Spelling of the scholar's name. Ibn Qudam. Yes.
The hadith about the one who brings the most benefit to people. After that statement, it gives examples of helping out a lot of Muslims. It actually mentions Muslims. Indeed, are there any narrations or have the scholars discussed the reward of benefiting Muslims versus non-Muslims in terms of relieving their stress, feeding the hungry, visiting the sick, helping them with money, etc., social welfare?
So basically, acts of kindness and charity for Muslims and non-Muslims alike are virtuous. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna fi kulli dhati kabdin ratba sadaqa." There is charity in every kindness you do towards anything with a moist liver, any living creature. There is charity in any kindness you do for any living creature. Anything with a moist liver, meaning any living creature. Now, can we say that this hadith would apply to non-Muslims? Not exactly. The hadith that talk about basic acts of justice and kindness and good manners would apply to Muslims and non-Muslims, even if Muslims were mentioned. Such as لا تحاسدوا ولا تناجشوا ولا تباغضوا ولا تدابروا ولا يباع بعضكم على بيع أخيه, and do not outbid your brother. Does it mean that as a Muslim you outbid non-Muslims? No, the scholars said that the mention of your brother here is not to exclude non-Muslims from those etiquettes, or from exhibiting those etiquettes towards them, that you do not outbid non-Muslims, or you do not do nudge, which is to hire the price for them without interest in purchase, or you don't do those acts. The mention of akhi, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned the word akhi here to highlight the evil of such acts, but not to mean that it would be permissible for someone who is not Muslim. Because those basic, tenets of conduct, you should adhere with them in your treatment of Muslims and non-Muslims. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ, in fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because there are those statements in the Old Testament about being able to take usury from someone who's not Jewish, for instance, versus someone who is Jewish. And those statements, we believe, have not been conveyed by Prophet Musa alayhi salam, because they compromise that sense of justice. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَقَالُوا لَيْسَ عَلَيْنَا فِي الْأُمِّيِّينَ سَبِيلٌ وَيَقُولُونَ عَلَى اللَّهِ الْكَذِبَ وَهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ. They said that there is no liability on us for what we commit against the Ummiyin, the Gentiles. And they speak falsehood against Allah. بَلَى مَنْ أَوْفَى بِعَهْدِهِ وَاتَّقَى فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُتَّقِينَ. Nay, whoever fulfills his covenant and fears Allah concerning their transactions with anyone, regardless of who they are, Allah loves those that are pious. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala condemned this from Bani Israel, condemned this attitude from Bani Israel, then certainly it is a condemnable attitude. And when it comes to justice and kindness with the people, you treat the people the same way. But is there a higher virtue for this when you do it to your Muslim brother? He's more entitled to your kindness. Therefore, there is higher reward. There is higher reward if you're... So Islam, there are rights for the bond of Islam, the wala, or the allegiance to Islam and the Muslims, comes with rights for each and every Muslim. There are rights for the neighbor. There are rights for the king, right? So if you have a Muslim neighbor who's your relative, no one has more rights than that one, right? A Muslim neighbor who is your relative has more rights than anyone else. Because there are rights for Islam, there are rights for neighborhood, there are rights for kinship, and this person has all of them. The neighbor who is Muslim but not of your kin has less rights than the first one. Does that mean that you'll do harm to them? Absolutely. They have a lot of rights. The neighbor who's not Muslim and not your relative, does he have rights? He has rights. Should you be just with them? You should be. Should you extend kindness to them? You should do that. But kindness that is extended to your Muslim neighbor who is your relative is more reward-worthy than kindness that is extended to your Muslim neighbor who's not your relative, or to your Muslim relative who's not your neighbor. Because that's a combination of rights. And when you have them all, then you get the greatest reward. So there is a higher reward for extending those acts of kindness to your Muslim brother. But that does not mean that there is no reward or there is no great reward in extending these acts of kindness to everybody. Which means, like, if you have a relief organization, you should prioritize the needs of your Muslim brethren, but at the same time, you should extend your scope of work to all people. And if there is like an emergency, such as in the Philippines, for instance, you should direct your resources to that emergency because it's so pressing, even though they are not Muslim. But generally speaking, you have in the back of your mind that the Muslims have more rights on you. Yeah. And I think we started to do this, alhamdulillah, right? Like, you get a lot of solicitation from Islamic Relief and ECMA Relief and so on for the disaster in the Philippines. The same happened in Haiti also when it was hit hard. So we're doing it, alhamdulillah. Sisters, you don't have any other questions?
Sure, quick question. How do you strike a balance between doing that good work and also fearing of falling into the gap and the shaitan pushing that thought into your head of doing things to show off and things of this nature?
Okay. The idea is you never quit doing your good work out of fear of riyah, because that is basically like a win-win situation for the shaitan. You know, what you need to do is you continue the good work and you continue to purify your intention. You continue the good work and you continue to purify your intention. There will always be ways for you to purify this intention while you're continuing your good work, if it is good. Now, if you completely defeated, like it is all not for Allah, the thing itself was instigated and maintained for other than Allah's cause or other than Allah's pleasure, then that is when you stop. It's totally, entirely, you know, and it is just not possible for you to clear your intention concerning this particular matter or this particular effort, then you just stop it. No.
Striking a balance between weaning yourself of the dunya, of interest in the dunya, and between not preferring hardship.
Well, when you wean yourself off the interest of the dunya, does not mean that you will give up the dunya. Does not mean that you will, because the Prophet ﷺ forbade Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas from giving up his wealth. And he said to him, and he said to him, he forbade him from giving up his wealth. He forbade him from, giving up in wealth more than 1/3 of his wealth. And he told him to leave, 2/3 or more for his family members. And because he said, وَالثُّلُث كَثِيرٌ, and 1/3, to give 1/3 out in charity is much. The Sahaba radhiyallahu anhum used to give 1/5 of their, wealth in charity. So basically, giving up the interest in the dunya is not by sort of depossessing the dunya, if that's a word. It is by favoring, al-akhirah. Favoring al-akhirah is basically twofold. One, how are you acquiring the dunya? if your acquisition of the dunya is coming at the expense of the akhirah, basically the acquisition of the dunya and the pleasures and enjoyments and of this dunya is happening at the expense of an akhirah, so you're compromising the bounds of Allah, تتعدى حدود Allah, for the dunya. You're abandon wara, entirely abandon cautious piety or wara, leaving a margin of safety between you and haram. Or when you're compromising your obligations to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the acquisition of the dunya. For everybody, like in Egypt, they always tell you al-amal ibadah. So work is a form of worship. So why don't you pray? Let's take a little time off to pray. It's just 5 minutes, and then to al-amal ibadah. Work is a form of worship. This amal is actually ma'asiyah, it's not ibadah. لا خير في عمل يلهي عن الصلاة. There is no goodness or blessing in work that will distract you away from prayer. So now, all of this is about the acquisition of the dunya. You don't compromise, you maintain wara, you don't get distracted from your obligations, and from your equilibrium. There is a point of equilibrium for each one of us, and it's different between you and someone who's like an excellent surgeon, for instance. And the best thing he does is to do surgery for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he does a lot of this for charitable purposes, and he's very skilled, and so on and so forth. When we say to this person that you should be, certainly there is knowledge that you need, and this knowledge is not limited to the obligatory knowledge. There is knowledge for your spiritual growth to be able to carry on this journey. And this surgeon will need to acquire this knowledge. But when we tell him, to run around and attend all the seminars and lectures in town, is that his point of equilibrium? It is not. This may be prescribed for someone who is da'i, who does a certain job. He does it well. He works in some field and he does his job. He can maintain his family, but he spends more time on da'wah, reaching out to people, and so on and so forth. So everybody will have to find his point of equilibrium, where the entirety of his life is for Allah, but the division of this, the breakdown of this, varies depending on your skills, your talents, whatever gifts Allah have given you. So someone who is gifted in doing surgery is different from someone who is gifted in talking to the people. And the division, the breakdown of their time will vary based on that. If you are in IT and you're gifted at making websites, Islamic websites. I knew someone in IT when I was in Minnesota. He was producing Islamic websites for free for all organizations, left and right. And he was very skilled at this. So the breakdown of his time may be different, and he was not particularly, he was not the most scholarly, even though he was keen on learning. But he was not taking this path like with full-time dedication. But the breakdown, the point of equilibrium for this is different from the point of equilibrium for the surgeon. It's the point of equilibrium for someone who's a CEO of a company. And he is a very charitable person, a very charitable Muslim person, a CEO of a company, and he excels and he becomes like, Bill Gates or something in terms of wealth and so on. So everybody has this point of equilibrium. it is important that you don't disturb the point of equilibrium. It is important that you maintain at some degree of wara, cautious piety in your transactions. It is important that you stay away completely from haram. It is important that you live up to your obligations. You know, the fara'id of Allah Azza wa Jalla should never be compromised. And that's as far as acquisition. But then you acquired the dunya. How to keep it now in your hand and away from your heart, that is how you spend. How you spend. That's how you dispense, you know, from those acquisitions. And that is basically all of what we say was summarized by the Prophet ﷺ in just 2 words. When he said to Amr ibn al-As, نعم المال الصالح للرجل الصالح. How excellent is good money for a good man. So it said that mal salih, good money, acquired, that's the acquisition part. للرجل الصالح, for the good person, because he will know how to dispense it. So all of this is summarized in this hadith. نعم المال الصالح للرجل الصالح. Good money is good for a good man. But if it is not good money, it is not good. And if it is good money, but it is not in the hands of a good man, it is not good. Good money is good for a good man. The acquisition and the dispensing. And then when you acquire it and you hold it in your hand, the sign, there are so many signs that it has not captured your heart. And people can figure this out. People are able to know this, that it has not possessed you. You possess it. It doesn't possess you. It is in your hand. It is not in your heart. You're in control of your money. Your money is not in control of you. And people, all people know the many signs of this, including certainly how charitable they are and how much they give of this money for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes?
On the topic of riyah, when performing deeds in public in particular, we know that actions are by intention, but is it possible, in a sense, for your purification of your deeds to apply retroactively? For example, if you give in front of somebody and you know that despite your best efforts, there's still some form of riyah that you're struggling with, and you walk away from that deed dissatisfied because you know it wasn't 100% pure, can you still, after the deed is done, continue to, in a sense, purify it? Does that make sense?
Yeah. You continue to purify it by at least stopping the damage. It's the stage of damage control here. And the damage control is by quitting to show off, quitting to, consider it a favor on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or His creation. You quit the mention of this. You don't mention it anymore, because some people continue to mention, I have given this much money and so on. You stop mentioning it, and then certainly you don't remind the recipient of the charity, because that would be man, that would completely destroy the reward of the charity. Man is when you remind the recipient of your charity. So this is the stage of damage control, and then you purify your heart from the seeking of other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for future acts. Yes.
I have 2 questions that relate to each other. In terms of aligning,
Okay.
in terms of aligning actions to be strictly for the sake of Allah, does one need to establish this intention before every act of being, for example, for being kind or being to parents, if he is to expect a reward for this action? And is there a way to differentiate between riyah and an unaddressed shaitan provoked thinking? Is this thought in itself a possible sign of interference from shaitan with one's intention?
Okay. In the interest of time, I'll answer the first one, and I'll defer the answer to the second one until another session, another QA session. But the first issue is when goodness becomes a second nature, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deprive you of reward because you're just so used to doing good things, like when you don't think about kindness, like if you see someone walking in, like an elderly person walking in, and you stand up for them to greet them and to allow them to sit in your place, without thinking, that do you lose the reward for this action because you have not intended it at the time for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It is just part of your second nature. No, you do not. As long as it became part of your second nature for the sake of Allah, and as long as your devotion to Allah continues to be the main engine behind all of these, the main driving force. The main driving force is your pursuit of the pleasure of Allah. So individual acts of this nature will still be reward worthy even if you did not intend them at the time for the sake of Allah, because they became a habit for you. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-khayru 'ada wa-sharru lajaja." Al-khayr 'ada, al-khayr becomes a habit for people because it is in harmony with our fitra, our inclination. وَالشَّرُّ لَجَاجَ, and evil. Yes, Muhammad, how do you translate this? الخير عادة والشر لجاجة. الشر yeah, it's very hard. Lajaja is the thing that vibrates, about which you have so much reluctance. There is resistance. It does this. There is no comfort with it. There is discomfort, reluctance about evil. So al-khayr becomes becomes a habit for the servants of Allah, because keep in mind that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this. Allah is the creator of this universe. This universe will not find that each and every atom in this universe does not find its point of equilibrium, balance, except in the service of Allah, except in the pleasure of Allah. Because that is when you have harmony between al-qada' al-shar'i and al-qada' al-kawni, between the universal decrees of Allah and the religious decrees of Allah, His wants, His likes. Once you are in conformity with both, you will not have this conflict, inner conflict. Anyone who deviates, and all of the universe around us is in harmony with the universal decrees of Allah, because they have given up, the choice. They did not claim the choice. They gave up the choice. They wanted to be controlled by Allah all the time, by the universal decrees of Allah. So the sun does not have a choice. The rivers, the wind, everything around us is in complete conformity with the will of Allah, because they only have one decree that controls them. Which one? The universal decrees. You have two different forms of decrees, because you accepted the choice between right and wrong. So you have two different forms of decrees. The universal decrees that control you, life, death, sickness, health, to some extent wealth, poverty. Many, your race, you did not choose it. Your nationality, you did not choose it. Your family, you did not. So many universal decrees control you. But then you have the religious decrees of Allah, the wants of Allah. You could say yes or no. وَهَدَيْنَاهُ النَّجْدَيْنِ. We have shown him the two paths. So he can go here or there. If you choose the path that is desired by Allah, then you brought the two decrees in harmony, and that is when you will have no inner conflict. And that is why al-khayr 'ada, because al-khayr is in accordance and conformity with the divine will, or the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, So there should be no resistance in your heart for al-khayr. Should be complete harmony, no reluctance. Shar is lajaja. Shar is, lajaja would be conflict, resistance, discomfort, hesitation, reluctance, all of this. Lajaja is the thing that vibrates, that does this. Like, there is no balance, there is no stability, no serenity, no harmony, no complete acceptance. You continue to be uncomfortable about it. You continue to be uncomfortable about it. So, the pleasure of illicit sex, for instance. The person who does this, there are actually scientific data on the emotional consequences of illicit sex. The person who does this is not in harmony with the universal decrees of Allah. He will continue to have this reluctance, this conflict within himself. So shar is lajaja, or shar brings about inner conflict, and al-khayr is aada. Al-khayr becomes a habit. For the believer, khayr becomes a habit, so you do it naturally. You do it naturally. You act kindly towards your kin naturally, without thinking about it. As long as this was instigated for the sake of Allah, and is being maintained for the sake of Allah. And you have the litmus paper tests. Litmus paper test. Which one is the litmus paper test? If it goes against your interest, you still do it for the sake of Allah. That means that it is for the sake of Allah. So for joining the kin, for instance, you act kindly towards your kin, naturally, you don't think about it. But when are you being tested? When do you get the test? If your kin shuns you, if your relative shuns you, and you join them, that is because you're doing it for Allah. So a man came to the Prophet ﷺ and said to him, إِنَّ لِي قَرَابَةً أَصِلُهُمْ وَيَقْطَعُونَنِي وَأُحْسِنُ إِلَيْهِمْ وَيُسِيئُونَ إِلَيّْ قال لئن كان كما تقول فكأنما تسفهم المال ولا يزال معك من الله عليهم ظهير ما دمت على ذلك. So the man came to the Prophet ﷺ and said to him, I have relatives, I join their kinship and they boycott me, and I do good to them and they do evil to me. And the Prophet ﷺ said to him, if that is true, if that is really true, you are making them ingest the Ramad al-Nar, is basically the fire ashes of Jahannam. And you will continue to have support from Allah against them as long as you keep doing that. So keep doing it. It's a test. You're doing it for Allah, or you're doing it because it is just second nature. Because second nature is to be nice to your kin as long as they're nice to you. But you get, every once in a while, you get tested. Are you doing this really for Allah or not? Now, they will not be nice to you. What are you going to do? If you continue to be nice to them, then all of this niceness from before was truly for Allah. Carry on. But if you fail in that test, then all of that, was not really for Allah. It is just like human nature, human inclination. Having said that, it is important, and the righteous predecessors used to do this. And I don't recall the name of one of the Salaf who said who one time they asked him, there is a funeral, let's go to it. And he said to him, wait a second, let me make an intention. Let me make an intention. So he basically, he did not want to act hastily. There is a funeral there, let's go. So he goes with the crowd because everybody else is going. No, he just wanted one moment he wanted to pause and to renew his intention, or to affirm his good intention, or to make an intention. Because sometimes, like, people ask you to do something and then you say, yes, let's go, let's do this, a group of people together. So it would be important every once in a while that you really confirm your intention and that you're doing this for the sake of Allah. And every once in a while, use your litmus paper test. Use your litmus paper test. If it goes against your interest, if you don't have helpers, are you going to still be doing it? If there is not a large group that is going, are you going to go by yourself to the funeral? If no one else that you know is going, are you going to go by yourself or not? There is a funeral of someone, and you have like a couple of brothers who are going, and they tell you, oh, let's go, and then you go. And then another day, there is a funeral, someone like the first one, another acquaintance, another person, member of the community, but there is not those two brothers that were going the last time. Are you going to go by yourself or not? If it's truly for Allah, you'll still go. And if you don't, then you want to go back and ask yourself, am I doing it just for to be with the group, or doing it for the sake of Allah? So every once in a while you'll go back, but the quick answer to this, no, you still get rewarded even if you do not instigate a new intention for every act, because the khayr for you has become a second nature for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.